Hello, I'm Katie Leonard, Patient Advocacy Lead for UK Oncology Medical Affairs at GSK, and I'm happy to present this episode of the Mapping Myelofibrosis podcast series. This series features patients, experts and leaders in the myelofibrosis community sharing conversation, information and perspectives. So for people joining us who may not be familiar with myelofibrosis, it's a blood cancer characterised by the build-up of scar tissue in the bone marrow, and that interferes with the production of normal, healthy blood cells. What makes myelofibrosis so complex is that it can be quite different from person to person. Today we'll be speaking with Dave, a myelofibrosis patient based in the UK, on his unique journey with myelofibrosis. Dave, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Katie. About myself, well, I'm 72 this year. Originally an Essex boy, born and raised on the Essex coast, one of 5 children. Grew up with a love of the sea, a love of fishing, a love of wildlife generally. It was a very barren coast we lived at on the Essex coast, and then spent a lot of my youth just wandering around the cliffs and just taking in nature, the birds, fishing, and had a very enjoyable youth. Met my current darling wife, Frances. We married in May 2015 and have been happily married ever since.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. Thank you. And Dave, tell me why we've asked you to come to speak to us today.
It's my experience with myelofibrosis, which I was diagnosed with in October 2019. So therefore I've been living with nearly 5 years.
So Dave, could you tell me about your route to being diagnosed with myelofibrosis?
Yes, of course. It started, we were on holiday in Lanzarote, and I had a device on my wrist that measured my pulse, how many steps I'd done. It was one of these fitness type things, so you can see, make sure you're getting your 10,000 steps a day or something. And it was showing a very high pulse rate. It was averaging around 150 to 160. And I knew that was wrong, and we ended up going to a medical centre in Lanzarote. They sort of panicked and sent me to A&E, where I was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation and a very high irregular heartbeat. And then I think that was just an inherent weakness. There was something there, but they took some bloods, and the bloods showed some irregularities, which we really didn't pay too much attention to. And my hemoglobin was low. I wasn't really very anemic, but yes, they were worried about something. So I then was referred to a haematologist.
Yes.
And we went through a series of tests, culminating in a bone marrow test where they actually drill into your bone, which wasn't particularly pleasant, and extract a line of bone marrow. And that was when, in, as I say, October 2019, I was diagnosed with the myelofibrosis.
There must have been quite a lot of worry during that time, knowing that there was something there, but they didn't know what it was.
Okay. Ignorance is often bliss, isn't it? I didn't think it was serious. I think if I'd known I could possibly be looking at a cancer diagnosis, I probably would have been in a different frame of mind. But until we got the diagnosis, we had no idea whatsoever. And I didn't feel particularly ill. My heart was behaving fairly well, and we were carrying on as normal, really. It was very much, the initial prognosis was, well, there was no prognosis, but the initial action was, we'll wait and see, which is, or was almost worrying at the time, because it's almost, someone's telling me I've got this cancer that's quite rare, and it's affecting my hemoglobin, but what we'll do is absolutely nothing, and we'll just have a look at it every month, 3 months, 6 months, as the case may be. So it really was a do nothing, have regular blood tests, which is no great inconvenience to trot along to the hospital for a blood test. And it wasn't until my haemoglobin started going lower that then treatment began. And then when you describe it as a rare blood cancer, that makes it more serious. And obviously that was what we were told it was, so we knew straight away it was a rare blood cancer.
So Dave, you've been on watch and wait for a little while with no treatment at all, but from what I understand, your symptoms were becoming more of an issue for you. Tell me about the next steps.
They were regularly measuring the size of my spleen, which was starting to grow as the disease advanced. I was suffering more with night sweats and bone pain. And so a course of treatment was commenced, which actually attacked those symptoms, and it did improve. It was just the haemoglobin. And as we moved on, I was needing blood transfusions probably every 3-4 weeks, and in some cases every 2 weeks.
That must have had quite an impact on your life, having those blood transfusions quite so frequently.
Yes. I mean, the transfusions actually took the best part of a day, and also prior to the transfusions, I would have to go to the hospital to have a blood test, A, to measure my haemoglobin, and B, to get a match for the blood transfusion itself. You try to make the best of these things, but also the anxiety at that time seemed to hit me. There were a couple of occasions where I went in for transfusions, but I seemed to be so anxious that my blood pressure was high, and therefore transfusions had to be delayed until we could get the blood pressure down.
And I guess with the frequency of the transfusions, how did that impact your lifestyle in being able to do things, on a day-to-day, your lives, what you wanted to do with yourselves?
The original diagnosis, we just stopped holidays, really, or certainly anything abroad, and if we did anything, it was just for a week.
Yeah.
And didn't go too far. I carried on what I could. I'm a keen fisherman from my early youth, and I've carried on with that where I can. The real impact came, I think, as we said, when the blood was low. After a transfusion, I had a small window of where I felt quite good. I would try and do things in those windows, and then as over the next week, 2 weeks, the haemoglobin got lower, I probably didn't do very much at all.
So Dave, is there anything that you really want to say to anybody who's going through a diagnosis of myelofibrosis who might be listening to this podcast?
Yes, I would say it's hard to find words of wisdom. I would say listen to your own body, listen to the specialists, surround yourself with good, considerate people, which I know isn't always easy. Share your experiences with something like MPN Voice and or Blood Cancer UK, where you can talk and exchange views, problems, whatever, with other people going through similar situations. And above all, remain positive. And like the exercise, I'm a firm believer in, if you don't use it, you lose it, as they say. So, I try and go for walks. I make myself do things that I don't necessarily want to do, but I feel that I ought to do something.
Yes.
Just to keep my body moving.
Give yourself the motivation.
Yes.
and move about. That's really good advice, I would say, Dave.
Thank
you. Yes. So Dave, tell me about your experiences in interacting with patient organisations.
Our major involvement of actually sort of going outside the house has been with MPN Voice, where we've been to a couple of seminars, and Francis has come with me. On my side, I found it valuable talking to other people with the same diagnosis, and in some cases on the same treatments, and sharing experiences, which has been reassuring and interesting. Frances, in turn, has been able to talk to other partners as well, going through similar situations to herself. I think following our last seminar, she even touched base with one of the partners who was going through a hard time with a newly diagnosed partner.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. It sounds like, you've been able to support each other, receive support, and equally give support as well. I really appreciate you sharing this advice and your lived experience. And while each individual may experience myelofibrosis differently, I know there are people watching who will really benefit from hearing your story.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Katie. I've enjoyed the conversation. And to any myelofibrosis sufferers out there, all the very best for the future. Stay positive. With advances in medical science, there is a hope and a good future.
It was a pleasure, Dave. Stay tuned for additional episodes as we continue to shine a light on the most important aspects of life with myelofibrosis. It's these types of conversations and insights from the myelofibrosis community that will help us get ahead of this condition together.